What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain, and this is episode 91, Being a Self-Sufficient Music Producer. In order to be a successful producer, you need to learn how to learn on your own. So how do you learn to be self-sufficient? Got to do your Googles and learn how to Google. Figuring out where you're trying to go really helps you get there, and you have to be able to integrate your new knowledge into your routines, but you also have to understand why you're learning. Our song of the week is Happier Without Me, a super collab between Rip Kenny, 6th Street, Leo Gia, and Liz Bezler. It's already got over 500,000 plays on Spotify, so go run that up towards 1 million. It's a jam. Check it on out. And support our sponsors. That's Dojo TV, where you can get free producer live stream classes from the Dojo Senseis. Yummy Strums, where you can get high quality guitar samples, loops, one-shots, and more from Tesko and Company. The weekly download, where you can learn from Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. Insane deal. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. Check out thehumanmusicpodcast.com for more episodes, socials, and free sound packs. Follow us on Instagram at thehumanmusicpodcast and Twitter at humanmusicpod. With all that out the way, let's get on into this episode. It's a good one.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. All right, humans. So welcome back to the Human Music Podcast.
From Transylvania.
I want to cast your pod.
We should just all flip our cameras upside down so we're hanging
Oh my god, that would have been so much funnier. That's pretty good. Watch on YouTube if you want to see Luke flip himself upside down, pretend to be
Just
a
flip
bat.
the audio upside down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just phase invert it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
phase invert it.
Oh, it sounds so different now. that millisecond of delay, a phase delay, yes.
Isn't that crazy though that you could literally flip the waveform upside down and it doesn't matter whether the speaker is pushing or pulling necessarily? It will sound the same.
Yep. Pretty much.
It's just wild to me that a little vibrating cone thing can make
Right?
so many different
It's like
sounds.
so many different sounds.
Like
Like
pretty
you
much all
could
of them.
recreate the exact sound if
With
you
all-
had the exact same waveform. Like you don't have to sound design it if you just literally drew the exact same waveform. That crazy Noisia FM wiggle to squelch beautiful masterpiece is just a scribble from -1 to 1.
Very intentional scribble.
Like,
Very specific scribble.
Intentional Scribble. That's my new band name.
is that not ridiculous?
It's pretty wild. Technically, you can make anything through just stacking sine waves and constructive and destructive interference. It's pretty wild to think about.
Yep. Pretty trippy.
Yeah.
So, what are we actually talking about today?
Yeah, we're not talking about sound design, although
Before we
it
went to
would
Transylvania and
certainly
Phase
seem that
Town. Deep dive into the speaker cone. Yeah, we're talking about self-sufficiency.
we are.
Guys, what do we mean when we talk about self-sufficiency? What's even like the point of this episode?
Yeah,
I really want to know.
I mean, I feel like it's something that producers need to fucking know that they're gonna have to do almost everything for a long time. Like you need to learn the skill of being able to do it yourself to get to the point where you can have others do it for you. Like it's not a one-time thing on learning how to sound design. It is every step of the process. You got to learn the skill of self-sufficiency in order to become a professional producer, a legend that can have 20 other people doing everything except you writing the hook. Like it it's a life skill that you need to be a successful producer.
Yeah, especially nowadays when there's so much information out there and so many resources, it really is a skill to be able to take a look at all of the stuff that's out there and then to be able to figure out like what should I actually be focused on? What's the garbage information? What is the good information that I can't make use of yet that I should come back to 6 months or a year from now? All of that kind of stuff because um they say we live in like the information age or whatever, and literally up until like this phase of human history, the the real gold was in the knowledge itself, was in the having of knowledge. But now that we have an abundance of knowledge, it comes down to deducing what is actually practical and useful for me at this particular point in my life. And oftentimes I feel like people get overwhelmed by it, understandably. But a lot of the things I've done in my life that people look at me and find some kind of awe or whatever in, to me, it all seems very obvious. Like everything I've ever done to me doesn't feel that impressive because it's all shit that I've Googled and literally just learned how to search for the right kind of queries and stuff, which I never realized actually is a skill in and of itself. Like, how do you know the proper thing to look up? Like, people actually get really confused by that. So, I think one thing that's worth um, like embedding in yourself first off is the fact that you don't know everything, and to be able to kind of in that beginner stage just kind of like look at a few words or look at a few concepts that you're unsure of, and then just start researching those one by one and like do a little web from there. If this word leads you to these three words, like get through your tier 1 list of shit first, and then get to all these related words that are related to the first concepts, and then those are going to open new doors. And it's kind of like the climbing and descent and climb again of the what's it called, the we talked about it on the podcast before, where you're in that beginner stage, you think you know it all.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh yeah, the Dunning-Kruger
Dunning-Kruger
effect
is basically that. It's how do you know how to navigate your journey through the Dunning-Kruger effect? That's how I always seen learning as and utilizing Google and all that stuff as, and I think it helps when you view it from that kind of perspective.
And real quick,
I'll
for anybody
talk more
that
about my perspective,
doesn't know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, that's just at the beginning, your rate of learning seems so fast that you think you're way better at the thing than you really are. And then at a certain point, you'll kind of crash and feel like you're really bad at it, even though you're objectively better than you were before when you thought you were dope. And then it takes a lot longer for you to kind of rise in that curve of actually being really good at something and then realizing that you are really good at it. And so it's a weird psychological thing that comes across, in all humans. Google it. Learn to Google by Googling the Dunning-Kruger effect. And if you don't know how to spell that, it's okay. Google does. They'll like, did you mean?
Dude, honestly, I feel like most producers owe the fact that they're still producing to the Dunning-Kruger effect, because there's so much to learn that at the start, if you didn't think, delusionally or not, that you were going to fucking blow up, like you wouldn't have put in all the work to like push through sucking ass, like that the extrapolation of your current learning curve to being an absolute genius in 6 months from after the first 2 months that you started making music, like that actually I think helps some people, but you also have to understand after you get through that first phase, there's also a lot of work on the considerably more work on the other
Yeah.
side to get back up to that same level. But I wanted to kind of hammer home something that you said on like the philosophical nature of self-sufficiency in the information age, right? Like you said, now that we have all of the information at our disposal
And
the fact that
misinformation.
and misinformation, correct. That YouTube tutorial might be fucking up your snare.
Probably.
Now that we have all of the information at our fingertips, literally, it is not about what you know, but how you use it and what you choose to focus on in how you use that is really what will differentiate you from everyone else, right? And keeping that in mind on the macro level, like it can bleed into a lot of different areas that'll make you a proficient producer, like finding your sound. Like you can't be good at everything. You can either like was it one of you guys that said like a couple weeks ago like you can yeah, it was definitely you, Tesco. I was talking about like Jimi Hendrix or something.
Steve Vai.
Steve Vai, yeah, you
I
can
believe it was him. You can either be good at all of the technical abilities and skills, or you can have a style.
exactly. Like you should and need to distill down what information is going to actually contribute to pushing you forward as an artist, right? And at the center of that, how do you figure that out? How do you learn these concepts that are at the core of who you are as an artist? Is self-sufficiency, right? And like you said, we're in the information age, therefore I hate to say it, but you just really don't have an excuse. You just plain don't. Like you could literally Google anything and have a pretty solid answer, if not the answer, when it comes to literally anything. Like as it relates to music production, any technique you can Google and probably find a YouTube video on someone teaching you how to do it, how to use this program, how to use this plugin. Additionally, in this discussion, we'll probably branch out to how to learn video editing so you can make teasers for yourself, how to learn potentially graphic design, how to write an EPK. I mean, we touched on that in the last episode, but like all of these things that you will need to become a professional producer, you have the ability to learn. You have the information at your disposal. You just need to learn how to be self-sufficient in order to get that stuff in.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I think that helps to approach this kind of topic, if you're confused about, there's all these topics. What order do I learn them in? How do I manage all of this? What do I even search for? How do I know the right topics and terms and words? I think the main skill here, I'd say, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think, is reverse engineering. And then over time, as you learn more, kind of fill in the gaps between the big steps to create smaller steps for yourself. So if you're just getting into music and your goal is to be a superstar, then it might look like superstar, 10 albums, 100 singles, blah, 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 blah. But then it's like, as you start diving and maybe the first rung of the ladder, it's like super out of reach. You can't even get there. Then you're like, all right, well, what's the halfway point between 10 singles? Well, that's 5 singles. And then blah, 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 down to 1 single. And then, okay, well, to get my first single out, what do I need? Okay, I need to break it down. A song has an intro, a verse, a chorus, or a build, drop, whatever. You break that down. Then you learn those individual things. And if you can break it down step by step and add more rungs to that ladder, I mean, if you get granular enough with the steps, it turns from a ladder into like just a sloped ramp up, because the steps are so fine now and they so nicely lead into each other that it's just a very logical advancement of the previous concept before it that moves you forward.
Yeah, I actually really like that analogy. Thank you for that. It reminds me of something I teach all my students, which is around goal setting. It's setting what's called SMART goals. And for anybody that doesn't know, SMART, take that as an acronym. Any goal you set needs to be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. So, like, write it in a way that it hits all 5 of those criteria and you'll be able to get there. And the R for realistic literally means just that. Like, you need to be able to reverse engineer steps that you can do to get there. If you don't know the steps to get somewhere, it is unrealistic to think that you will arrive, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know what roads to take to get to a city, and you just guess at every turn, probably not going where you're trying to be. But, you know, if you can be like, okay, cool, in order to get to this goal, I need to do A, B, C, D, and E, and then I arrive, then boom, you'll probably be able to get there. And then breaking that down into finer steps, you know, bite-sized pieces so that you can get a thing done and know that you're on track is a lot easier. Like, just like it's better to, you know, have the goal on your writing session of successfully making a first draft of your song than it is to expect that first writing session to be a finished, completed project of your song.
Or you say make an absolute banger. Like that writing session might lead you inspirationally away from writing just a banger, and you might write an absolutely beautiful acoustic ballad. Who knows? But
Totally.
that's also yeah, like that kind of thing is not really like a good smart goal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a couple lessons recently, working with some of my students who do bass music.
Get that
And-
mic in front of your face, my dude. It's got a little quiet. Yeah, a little closer.
Cool.
Hey, much better.
So I've been doing some sessions with some students who recently I've had a couple of these kind of in a row of, you know, with some of my students who are doing bass music, and they're a little in the earlier stages, and bass music, arguably there's a lot of moving parts there. It's kind of a harder genre to tackle, and for a lot of them it's like, you know, a lot of people, they hear dubstep, for example, for the first time, and it evokes such a strong response, and they just want to jump right into that genre. And so they go in and they try to write their first tune, and they'll send me a project file of a track that's got like 15 to 20 tracks in it, and they'll be like, yeah, you know, I like the idea of it, but it isn't hitting like the artists I want. Like, I don't understand why my buildup doesn't sound like full, and then when my drop hits, it doesn't like feel like it explodes out like these songs I'm hearing. And the first place I'll start is like, obviously depending on their skill level, right? It's like only bite off as much as you can chew. But for my more intermediate guys, I'll be like, all right, well, who do you listen to? Right? Oh, Virtual Riot. Oh, I like Company. Oh, I like this guy. Right? Okay, cool. So we're gonna type in Virtual Riot live stream, and we're gonna find one where he's got a fully finished track that sounds really big and dope. And wow, would you look at that? He's got 150 channels, which is literally 10 times the amount of the channels that you sent me. So if you're wondering why your drums don't pop, how about we start there and we build you up to the point where you're comfortable doing 40, 50 channels worth of drums and layers and stuff like that. And then we'll worry about the crazy sound design stuff. We'll get into the 40 channels of that. But you're never going to achieve this goal, first off, if you aren't aware of the fact that their drums have 50 layers and they have an effects section way in the background that's mixed super quiet. That's another 20 layers. And they have certain sounds that only happen once in the song momentarily and never again. All these little details, which is a little too much to think about in the beginning. But, you know, it's like, you're not even aware of how much detail goes into this track, and then you're trying to replicate this result with limited resources and wondering why you're not getting there. It's like, let's find a resource where we're able to take a look under the hood of a professional product and then break it apart one by one. Like if I'm trying to understand how this iPhone works, I'm not going to just open it and be like, huh, there's a shit ton of parts in there. Let me just try and do that. Right? I'm going to be like, wow, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Let me spend a week just looking into how this screen works. Let me spend a month reading up on motherboards in general. And then let me spend another month looking at the iPhone motherboard in particular. Oh, let me see how this charging port works. You go into these rabbit holes where for an extended period of time, you're breaking down this big moving thing into smaller bite-sized pieces, and then you're striving for mastery at each small step. Because really, if you were to break this down, now I'm a dum-dum when it comes to electronics and everything that's going on in here. I don't know how it works. But having gone through sucking at something and then reverse engineering and breaking down the process, I realized that, and I'm not trying to discredit anybody, right? Like, definitely people that go to school are more qualified than me. But I don't look at electronics now and I'm like, oh, this is mysterious and I absolutely need to go to school to be taught by professionals and all this stuff to do everything. And it's like, definitely there is value in having that available, but it's not some untouchable thing that you can't ever get into, because there are resources out there on how to solder and how motherboards work and blah blah blah, all these things. And with due diligence and enough time, you can actually break these down yourself and figure it out. The leg up that you have when you're going to school is that somebody who's already gone through the process, or like us now teaching students, is we've gone through everything. We've went through the process of not knowing and having to learn, and then learning what we don't know and researching that, so that when a new student comes, I can be like, oh yeah, your song's obviously not slapping because you're not even aware that you need 150 channels. And then that sets them on the journey of, oh, this is what I need to do. Oh, now my frame of reference has totally been shifted and I can actually approach the problem in the correct way.
Yeah, knowing what you don't know, right? And I think like that, your analogy really reminds me of something like the arrangement exercise that we all learned from Il Gates, where it's like, all right, how does this genre of music work? Well, pick a song in that genre and spend time breaking down every part. Like, what is the drum track doing? How many different channels can I pick out with my ear just when listening to the tune? Like, okay, what's the kick doing across the song? Then what's the snare doing? What's the hi-hat? What's the other how many hi-hats are there? Well, there's like 6 different hi-hats. Okay, what about shakers? What about cymbals? How many kinds of cymbals? Is there more than that? If I listen really closely, like, then like, that's just drums and percussion. And then like, okay, what are the basses doing? What are the leads doing? What are the vocals doing? What are is there any more parts? Oh, hey, listen to those quiet parts in the background. What about the effects? What are we changing? Like, there's so many pieces of a song that can go into making what you're doing. And if you don't take the time to break down and listen to what's there, then how are you ever going to remake that? And then, like Tesko was saying, like, if you don't like go look at somebody who's doing what you want to do and try to find their live stream or try and find their project file, or just look if there's any resources out there that somebody's already explained part of this or all of this. Like, if you're not doing your Googles and doing your YouTube searches, and or sometimes it's the self-sufficiency to search for mentorship or search for a program or a course that somebody's already figured out how to do this and is teaching you for a price that makes way more sense than looking to Google all the 1,001 things that you need to know. There's, so sometimes that self-sufficiency is literally doing it by yourself, and sometimes it's having the wherewithal to find the teaching that already exists.
Even if you don't have the resources to get a dedicated mentor to work with you, just buy one plugin less and literally just buy one consultation session with with somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing and just be like, bro, or broette or whatever. Just be like, yo, just tell me what I need to Google, because guarantee you don't even know. And like you said, Luke, it's like it comes down to the basics there, where you're like, oh, do I know how to do hi-hats? You need to have mastery of hi-hats before you have mastery of drums, before you have mastery of song, before you have mastery of album, mastery of career. It all builds on itself. And I always think of those people that stack rocks, where it's like they'll get these really oddly shaped rocks and they'll find like the center of balance on each, and then you'll have a huge ass rock that's like balancing a little pebble on top, and that little pebble is holding out like 4 rocks that are somehow weirdly enough, balanced out on like this crazy formation. And it's like every rock from the top up depends on the one below, which depends on the one below, which depends on the one below, which when you go all the way down the structure is firmly planted on the ground, which is the most strongest support. And the ground that you build on is your mastery of the basics.
Yeah. And I think like the cool part about it too is you don't necessarily need to do it in any one order or any one way. If you learn how to learn it yourself, like you can follow step by step. Like, okay, so I got this part that was interesting me first. Like I learned how to sound design some Skrillex basses. All right, cool. So I've got that. Like, what else do I want to learn that like excites me right now? And you can learn how to make punchy drums by watching that Virtual Riot live stream. I mean, just like how Luke said, like if you don't have a map and you are guessing how to get from point A to point B, you're going to not get there. Like if you do have a map, you'll realize that there's multiple routes to get to that destination. And maybe the first time you take the most direct route on the freeway and you hit some traffic and it wasn't scenic and it didn't really deliver the experience that you wanted. So you're like, you know what? I'm going to take the route that's a little bit longer, but it goes by the beach and there's not really traffic on it because it's kind of more residential or out there. But, I enjoyed that experience of doing it this way. And this aligns more with me and what I'm trying to do. So, I mean, it's just the same in production. You learn how to do drums like exactly like Virtual Riot or whatever. And then you're like, okay, cool. So that's the freeway that works really well and takes people there at high speed. And then you're like, but I kind of have this interest of doing it a little differently. So let me figure out how to get there a different way. And you see someone like Levitate who uses all this crazy like metal percussive Foley and has just as many layers, but do way different stuff. And you're like, you know what? This route takes a little longer to get to the nice drums destination, but it aligned a little bit more with what I'm trying to do, and I like this, so I'm gonna incorporate this way of doing this into my sound. And so you can really in that way just build and then change course and step by step actually get to something that represents you as well, right? Rather than just taking the freeway on everything.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And there's nothing wrong with taking the freeway. You know exactly where you're going to end up. You know exactly how much time it's going to take, or give or take, right? It's like once you know how to get there is when you can start experimenting with the scenic route. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you take the bike there, or maybe you walk there, or whatever.
Yeah. It's like if you first move to a city and you're like, oh man, this whole city is just like this blur, it's like the video game map is mostly blank. You get that one route to get across the city. You're like, okay, I got it. And then after you get a little comfortable, you get a little bored with that. And you're like, oh, what happens? I got a little time today. What happens if I take a left here? You go on some wild goose chase and oh, that's where this comes out. Nice. This is a good shortcut. I'll keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. Like you start to fill in your map of like how to get from A to B with different techniques. And then you start to figure out which of these are my favorite, which of these produce the types of sounds that I like the best and the types of things. And like we were talking about, you can either get good at everything or you can have a style. You know, if certain routes of getting there are not dope to you, you don't enjoy doing them, and you don't enjoy the way it sounds, don't do it. Cool, you know it. If somebody's like, oh, I really need that like Phil Collins drum sound, and you know how, cool. But if you don't like that and you like lo-fi hip hop drums, rock on, do that instead. Make that part of your style. Figure out what you dig and like then hone in on your routes to get there for certain parts of it. And you know, that's going to be helping you set up a style.
Yeah. And one thing that's really worked for me, at least when I'm like, you know, learning, trying to figure out, like, trying to stumble across something cool that I would like, you know, like to use in my own music. One thing that's really kind of helped me is like, it sounds simple, but just like follow the dopamine. Like, what sounds exciting to you right now as far as like learning and improving and bolstering your skill sets, right? Because just like we said, you can either have all of the technical tools or you can have a style. Quote from Steve Vai via Tesko. There's going to be certain concepts, certain things in music that you're going to gravitate to, and doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on those is actually going to be more beneficial to you, right? So like, for instance, I love sound design, if you couldn't guess, based on the modular system that I have. And if, you know, my music has a lot of crazy sound stuff going on in it sometimes. And it's something that interests me. Like, I love doing that, you know. And like right now, one of the things that takes up a lot of my time is like playing guitar, because that's like following the dopamine for me right now, is like getting better at guitar and learning and just like feeling out where my melodic sensibility can be explored through using the guitar and different effects and like tones, and really establishing new pathways to get to the destination of a song starter, you know, that is more through the guitar than clicking notes into the MIDI. And like, there's unlimited things that you could spend your time to get really good at. But ultimately, I think that if you know, really focus on the stuff that you love and get better than 99% of other people at these couple things, these few things, that you don't even necessarily need to be the best or better than 99%. But if you spend enough time to figure out how to do it your way and no one else's way, that is really what's going to set you apart. And it's easier to follow the stuff that's fun, right?
Totally. Another really big part of this is, are you able to identify when you do hit a wall, when you have a shortcoming, what it actually is? Did I cut out there?
Nah, your audio didn't. Your your video kind of froze on a stank face for a minute.
It was great.
Subscribe to the YouTube to see Tesko's mid-phrase stank face.
So are you actually able to identify, first off, what you don't like about the result that you just achieved? Because oftentimes people, again, you know, students who maybe haven't developed breaking this down as much will just show me a song and be like, you know, my sound design, it could be better, and my drums aren't good. And I'm like, okay, well, let's elaborate. What's not good about the drums? Can you tell me a little more detail? What do you not like about your sound design? Is it not full enough? Is it too simple for you? Do you not like the arrangement of it? What don't you like about your drums? Are the textures of the individual drums too soft? Is it just the kick that's off? Are your drums not bright enough? These are the kind of questions you need to be asking yourself, because this is the shit that you Google. These are the queries that are actually going to get you the answers that you're looking for, instead of just typing reddit.com, why are my drums whack? And it's
Google make drums better ?
Yeah. And you might read a thread and they're like, oh, your drums suck because you're using the wrong samples. And then maybe your samples are actually pretty good. And so that takes you on a whole tangent where you get caught up on splice and waste a couple hours looking for better samples, when in actuality, if you were just able to pinpoint what it actually is that you don't like about this, and then you look at tutorials, you look at resources specifically on that, then you'll start to discover the terminology for new stuff that you can look into. You'll start to find little tips and tricks that will actually get you closer to that result. But until you can actually name what aspect of what you just did isn't meeting your standards, then you're forever going to be kind of stuck in this limbo of not knowing what to do, and it's like losing your map halfway through the trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing how to break down the break down this big problem, drums not good, into smaller pieces.
Knowing how to break down.
Knowing how to
drums
hit the
go
China
halftime. You got a really catchy, chuggy sound and rhythm, and then you just hammer it. Knowing how to break down.
Yeah. Unless you're not doing metal, in which case take all the drums away, make the subs way chiller, lush pads, and bring back the vocal hook.
Yeah, exactly. Know how to break down, and know how to break down a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and know how to break down the breaking down of a breakdown is key. Knowing how to talk in circles just by adding words, that's podcasting.
Yep.
Brilliant.
So what do you guys feel like has been one of the more kind of important, useful skills, or just something you noticed that's different between you and maybe some of the students that you guys have had that haven't been able to get this down exactly, or have struggled with it a little more than you have?
Nose goes.
Damn. All right. Yeah, I think, one of the things is just like actually showing up to do the research. Tell you what, like showing up to learn. I've talked to a lot of students that set goals on what they wanted to do, but failed to set smart goals on how they wanted to get there and what they were going to do to get there. And so it's like, this overarching goal of I'm going to release more music in 2021. And then the end of the year comes, like, I didn't release any music. And I was like, oh, let's break it down. Like, what were your actual goals? That was it, just to release more music. I'm like, okay, cool. So more music that's not measurable, it's not very specific at all. It's, so breaking down your goals, like you said before, like getting in front of yourself with what are the steps to get there, and like making a plan, making checklists has been really helpful for me. Like writing out the steps of what I want to do, and then actually physically having to check each step off in order to get to the end of my plan. That's been really big. That self-sufficiency of planning, and then the self-sufficiency of accountability to myself based on this thing I wrote down, that now every day I look at that list and I'm like, all right, well, I've still got all these things on the list I've got to go do. And, don't get me wrong, sometimes those lists hang out and stay unchecked longer than other times. And, I'm working on, keeping my motivation high all the time. I've noticed that keeping my mind right and my body healthy has a big impact on whether or not I'm getting my checklists done efficiently. So taking that step back and being like, okay, yeah, I've decided I want the productivity, but like, am I healthy? Am I happy? Because if I'm not those two things, it's going to be really hard for me to also be kicking ass on my goals. So sometimes taking that step back and being like, you know what? I'm going to like make myself a healthy meal, take a nap, do a workout, take a shower, go for a walk. Like sometimes that's the best thing to do, and take that much needed like pause for self-care instead of just diving forward into wishing I was more productive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you said really kind of ties into what I was actually thinking about saying, which is like establishing a framework for utilizing that skill that we're talking about, uh of, you know, being able to do it yourself, learn it yourself. Like that is the foundational skill, but if you don't have a framework for how to get to where you're trying to go, or what steps, what kind of things you need to learn, you could fall into the trap of endlessly learning and not producing, right? Endlessly absorbing that information without actually doing it, without acting on it, without making something out of it. That's why, I mean, as an aside, like if you're ever watching a tutorial, like open up Ableton, put it, you know, maybe half size if you can on your computer, and like, or just click back and forth and follow along. Like pause the video, do it yourself. Don't copy them. Just like intake the information they're giving you and then try and recreate it yourself. And if it's like wrong or it sounds terrible or it's not even close, like, yeah, okay, go back to the video, be like, what did I do wrong? But what I've honestly found is that doing that while listening or watching tutorials or content, I'll frequently fuck stuff up that ends up being really cool.
Happy
Like
accidents.
how to do this cool technique ended up in me figuring out this like weird thing. And I'm like, that's sick. Like I'm going to use that a lot. Um, and that is, you know, part of the skill that we're talking about. But really what I wanted to say was like figuring out your end goal, say for instance, for your sound, right? And for me, when I did the soul searching to realize like shit, okay, I gotta make the music that only I would make, I realized, okay, I need to learn how to play guitar. I cannot do that right now. And if I'm gonna make rock metal influenced music, like I have to be able to do that. And that is an obvious piece of that framework, right? And then, you know, start practicing. Just like how when I was like, okay, I want to do bass music, I need to learn how to sound design, like 15 minutes a day sound designing, just like that. After 4 years, I got proficient at it. Like, you know, I can make stuff that I'm like, huh, I've never heard that before. I'm not nearly 4 years into playing guitar, but it is something that I spend 15 minutes a day doing, typically, sometimes more, some, you know, you actually usually more. If I pick up the guitar, it usually ends up being an hour just because I love it, you know, and that's like, and that's part of it though. It's like a lot of the times, if you figure out the alignment between your framework and what you love, that's where you're going to find success, because the motivation to do those things is easy. Like I'd rather pick up the guitar and practice than mix down a song. I truly would, because it's fun. And mixing down a song is something that I've already, for the most part, learned how to do pretty good. And it's just a big puzzle that, you know, takes a lot of time. Guitar is like that, you know, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you get a little bit better and you're like, wow, okay, sick. Like you know, it excites you to learn more because you're learning at a faster rate than you are in this other stuff. And figuring out how to constantly use the overall framework. Okay, so just use myself as an example. You know, bass music with metal, punk, emo influences. Okay, so like I needed to learn sound design. Obviously, this is all on top of knowing how to use Ableton. I needed to learn sound design first for the bass music part, which is at the core. Like, okay, I got that. Now, continuing to do that, but also what is the next thing that's going to like become like my love to practice? And that was guitar. And then now vocals are also in there, although I like I like practicing guitar a lot more than doing vocal exercises. I'm not going to lie, vocal exercises are a chore to me, but it's part of the framework. So I force myself to do them, even though it's not necessarily the most fun thing, which is kind of the caveat to like follow the dopamine. Like sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. And sometimes you got to focus. If the framework determines that you need a certain skill or something that you just got to hammer on, like sometimes it's not going to be the most fun, but you got to do it. Right. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say is figure out where you're trying to go and figure out what alignments there are in that framework that you create that you can leverage to learn those skills quicker, have fun doing it, and like create the end result that you want to while, being efficient with it.
One thing I want to
Amen.
throw out as well is dopamine works.
Tesko, your mic cut out again.
Oh, we good? No?
I can hear you, but it says you're offline on the recording.
Huh. I couldn't hear him. That's interesting.
Weird.
We back.
Yeah, he's back.
Okay, bet. So one thing, right, is breaking down why do you need to learn this thing in the first place. It's the difference between, for example, how are you able to force yourself to do the vocal stuff? It's because you have this vision already of where you're trying to go, and you've reverse engineered it, and you've broken it down, and you've seen that, oh, this is a step on my ladder. And the way dopamine works is it works in anticipation of something, not actually achieving the thing. So if you can find the light on the other side for you to get across this obstacle, it makes it way easier than if you were to just go, for example, right? Like, let's say you're like, I want to learn guitar, and scales are just some shit that you need to know if you know guitar, and you find a couple of things. You're like, yeah, I need to know chords and scales because people that play guitar know chords and scales. Versus if you're like, here's where I'm trying to go. Here are my favorite artists. Here's what chords and scales they use, blah, 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 blah. And you find where it fits in the ladder. Then you have a purpose to learn that, and you have a reason to go through with it. Like, I feel you on the vocals. I hate practicing vocals, but when I think of the end result of being able to do riffs and runs flawlessly and put that in a song just like in one little moment, and it's so second nature that I don't need to flex it too hard. I can actually just sparingly use it. That gives me a lot of hope to be like, all right, I'm gonna bust open the pentatonic scales today and I'm gonna go at this. I doing pentatonic scales? Fuck no. But I can't wait until I can finally do it to achieve that end result. Without the why, there's no way I'd bust open pentatonic scales and do that for fun.
Yeah, finding the why is so important. I remember I back in the day taught some English while I was traveling in Chile, and I had a class of students that just great human beings, loved the kids, but they did not care about learning English at all because they had no why. And it took me a hot minute to realize that, like, oh, like it's because they live in the south of Chile, thousands upon thousands of miles from the nearest English speaking country, and it just doesn't connect to them why this is at all important. And, that made me realize, like, okay, anytime I'm teaching somebody, I need to figure out their why and help them connect to that so that all of the advice I give them and all of the learning I give them actually hits home and sticks around. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, oh, some shit I heard that didn't connect to my life. It has to like hit that emotional chord or it's not going to make sense. And then also touching on what you were talking about a minute ago, Evan, was like taking the time to actually integrate the knowledge that you got for a good reason into your routines and your habits. Because if you don't take the time to actually practice that skill and get it to be a part of your routine. Like I was taking a yoga class actually from Dojo member Hexadevi today online. And what she was saying was that like you've got to hardwire your habits in with your other habits. Like, so if you want to add a yoga practice to your life, you've got to like figure out where in your existing routine to put this so that it sticks, as opposed to like, so like if your yoga was your New Year's resolution, don't tie it to your other New Year's resolutions, because if you fail at one of the new things, you'll fail at the rest. instead, like, okay, cool. Like, what do I do in the morning? Well, I do my journaling and I do my coffee. Well, then, okay, I'll put yoga right between those two things. So wake up and do the journaling, and then I'll do the yoga, and then I'll get the reward of having the coffee. And, so taking what you're learning and putting it into the routines you already have, like if you're going to make a tune and you want to learn sound designing, maybe do sound designing for those 15 minutes first, and then write a tune with whatever you sound designed. And then that's like, you get to do the part you're already doing. Say it was timer beats, and then do something in sound design, like go learn a skill, practice it, and then put it to use.
Yeah, well said. That,
Sounds
especially
like
that part on
yeah.
chaining habits.
Yeah.
You
That
can't
hit
just
me hard
expect
today.
yourself to change.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't just float
Yeah.
something out there. It's gotta be anchored.
And again, I want to bring that to the point of awareness and breaking down, what am I doing? What am I unhappy with when it comes to my results? And then revisit that process. I've ingrained the habit of sitting down at the timer beats. I'm just noticing that when I get to the final product, my drums are always lacking because they're not bright enough or I'm not picking the right signals. So now you bring that with you to the beginning of the process. It's like when I'm talking with people about mixing and mastering, for example. It's like you're not going to get to an elite level of mixing and mastering. I'm not. You're not going to get to a place where you're happy with if you haven't seen enough tracks through to the finish line, because it's the lessons that you learn at the end of the process that you now bring to the beginning of the process that refines the workflow.
Amen. Amen for sure.
Absolutely.
Whew. Speaking of the end of the process, I feel like we might be at the end of the process of this episode here. feels like we dropped a lot of good knowledge bombs. Let's give the humans some time to integrate these knowledge bombs and practice them in their lives over the next week.
Just remember to take the scenic route after you've taken the freeway.
Amen.
After you know where you're going.
Yeah. After you know where you're going, after you found the map, after you drove the freeway the first time, then take the freeway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of this stuff individually, the small steps are not too hard. When you really break it down, if you reverse engineer it, each individual step could be done by a month. And gives me a lot of confidence when I'm, like, for example, when I was talking about the phones. It's a very complex device here, but I'm willing to bet, anybody that dives into a topic that they really want to learn, if you can just break down the simple step, if you can understand what is a capacitor, what's the integrated circuit, okay, what's some other board, build it up slowly from there, I have no doubt everybody listening here could understand how to create one of these. It's just, you have a why, do you first off want to know? And if you
don't, I'd rather build songs.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to take calls, or ignore them. Y'all know me.
It's a great example because it's something that like most people will look at and just be like, wow, marvel of human technology. I have no idea how it works. I don't know.
It's magic.
I plug it in at night, and it does the things, and then I use it during the day.
Yeah, and then I watch TikTok. But all right, humans. Till next week. Let's give them a peace. And a peace among worlds.
Later, bitches.
Bruh. All right, humans. Thanks so much for being with us. Truly appreciate y'all. Visit us at thehumanmusicpodcast.com for more episodes, socials, free sound packs, etc. See what we're offering. And, find us at Human Music Pod on Twitter and at The Human Music Podcast on Instagram. You can support our sponsors like Dojo TV, where we do a live stream every other Tuesday, and a bunch of the other Producer Dojo Senseis also do free live stream classes. Great content over there. Yummy Strums, where you can get high quality guitar samples, loops, one-shots, racks, and more from our very own Tesko. The weekly download, where you can learn from our mentor, Il Gates, and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. and guest practices where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. Again, that song of the week is Happier Without Me, Rip Kinney, 6th Street, Leo Gia, and Liz Bezler. Such a jam. You can hear it now. Make sure to go run that up at the links below. Until next week, peace. Peace among worlds.
I like it.